Is there someone who's controlling like the focus of the camera who's going to be spotlighted or not?
You can do that, Zara.
Huh?
I can do it.
Okay.
And Dada, maybe you can just mention that we are recording the webinars for the note purposes. It's basically
Okay.
to help us preparing the report.
Okay. Okay. Do we have a backdrop while we start?
You will be starting, including the introduction. Yeah.
So are we starting now? Should I say good morning to everybody?
I think you can go ahead.
Hello, good morning to everyone. Thank you for joining us in this series of webinar for the APAN pre-forum webinar. Today, our topic is on bridging systems on the nexus of food, agriculture, land, and biodiversity. Good morning, Marily. Can you spotlight me, please?
Yes, you're spotlighted, Dada.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us. And this webinar is co-organized by IUCN and FAO Regional Asia Pacific Office together with the APAN Secretariat. We are very happy that you have joined us. For today, we wanted to let you know that we hope it's okay. We are recording this series and that the objectives of this webinar today, the same with the other webinar, was to really explore the integrated solutions across systems towards transformational adaptation, including examining interconnected challenges and opportunities across systems. We are also hoping to foster collaboration and align policy dialogue for adaptation goals on governance, equity, and financial mechanisms. We're also, for this webinar, hoping to highlight cross-sectoral best practices or approaches. We really wanted to know what are the examples out there on nature-based solutions, regenerative agriculture, sustainable ecosystem management, local knowledge that strengthen both food security, equity, and biodiversity conservation. My name is Imelda Bacudo, and I will be your moderator for today. Another one of the objective is that a few months ago, earlier in this year, both IUCN and FAO, together with many other partners, co-organized Asia Pacific workshop on NDC 3.0 and a preparation for COP30. And we wanted to share the highlights of that Asia Pacific results and see how the discussions will be really reflecting many of the findings that we got from that workshop, in which we found out, for example, countries in Asia and the Pacific have expanded the scope and depth of adaptation and mitigation measures in the agriculture sector. Adaptation planning, in particular, has become more comprehensive. 83% of NDCs now include specific adaptation actions, and 60% feature time-bound targets. So the risk to food security and biodiversity remain the most frequently cited climate-related threats, underscoring the vulnerability of agri-food systems in the region. For NDC 3.0, which we know countries are hoping to submit next month, countries agree that a strategic shift is imperative, and that's why a webinar such as this is very important. And this shift includes innovation in climate finance mechanism to de-risk agriculture investment, strengthen institutional coherence, and cross-sectoral collaboration, significantly expanding, for example, transparent MRV system. So we're framing this as a result from the joint IUCN FAO workshop on NDCs that really gave us some of the themes on agri-food at the nexus of agri-food system and biodiversity. But to better welcome all of us and to formally start our webinar, I'd like to call on my friend, Dr. Dindo Campilan, who is the Regional Director for Asia and Oceania of IUCN, to welcome us all. Dindo, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dada, and good morning from Bangkok. Welcome to this important webinar, part of the lead up to the 9th Asia Pacific Adaptation Network APAN Forum happening next month. And it's a pleasure for me to welcome you to today's dialogue on bridging systems, a theme that speaks directly to the heart of transformational adaptation. IUCN with FAO and UNEP, we're proud to be co-organizing this session, bringing together diverse voices to explore the nexus of food, agricultural, land, water, biodiversity, and climate. So where do we start this morning? I think there are three important points to remind us. Both IPCC and IPBES have already underscored that biodiversity loss and climate change are two sides of the same coin. So we need to devise solutions that jointly address both as one interconnected challenge. Second, for those of us working on the biodiversity side, we already talked about the target of bending the curve. What is bending the curve? Over the last century, nature destruction has been at a rate faster than its ability to recover and to regenerate. Now, 2030 is the deadline for bending the curve, meaning to reverse the current trend of declining biodiversity. Now, why is it important and relevant today? Because bending the curve by 2030 requires not only large-scale conservation, restoration, it must, and I underscore, it must be accompanied by sustainable food systems, responsible land use, and addressing climate change. Third, our starting point today, bridging the systems, the theme of this webinar, is already embedded in the multilaterally agreed goals of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. If you look at the 23 targets, almost one-third, 6 of them, specifically aimed for this transformational adaptation, meaning that the successful conservation of species and ecosystems can only be achieved by changes in human food preferences, dietary patterns, nutritional outcomes, reduced food loss. So today's webinar is an opportunity to learn more about this. We'll hear from experts who are working to break the silos, refocus towards intersection on the systems for regenerative agriculture, water management, biodiversity conservation, inclusive governance. Now, this insight will help us understand how transformational adaptation can be scaled through co-benefit strategies, policy innovation, community-led action. In other words, nature-based solutions. And we at IUCN, we're excited that in 2 months, the global standard for NBS version 2.0 is going to be launched. So I think today is an opportunity to learn further. How do we refine as a step towards the launch of version 2.0? Now, finally, on a more personal note, I am truly invested in this webinar and, of course, super excited. For someone spent the career for over 20 years in agriculture, food systems, and climate just before moving to IUCN. So let's learn from each other, let's challenge our assumptions, let's co-create pathways. I'm actually curious if at the end of this webinar today, we might not just talk about transformational adaptation, but maybe transformational thinking. That instead of just talking about bridging systems, we may end up talking about one system. After all, it's one ecosystem, it's one planet, and it's one people. Thank you. Over to you, Dada.
Thank you, Dindo, for the inspiring words and transformational system. And therefore, we hope this webinar could also really contribute to transformational action, right? And we have prepared a very exciting panel to really discuss on how we could have this very exciting examples to really understand and see how we could scale up many of the inspiring examples out there. And you have mentioned also, Dr. Dindo has also mentioned the science or IPCC that has really spoken. So let's really start our exciting discussion with a scene setter from the IPCC. I would like to introduce Teresa Wong, who's the head of science of the IPCC Working Group 2 Technical Support Unit in Singapore, where she is responsible for delivering and coordinating science-related inputs for the 7th assessment cycle and for building relevant regional scientific and policy networks. Teresa, I hand over the floor to you to really let us know what the science says on transformational adaptation. Teresa?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm just trying to load up the presentation and make sure that it is here. Sorry, I'm just trying to increase my screen as well. How do we do this? Thank you so much for having me, and greetings from Singapore, where we might be an hour ahead of all of you. I'm really struck by the words of Dindo, that transformational adaptation that we've talked about so much is not merely about transforming systems, but about transforming thinking. And that's, definitely in my mind as I was preparing this presentation. So we might also even think beyond food, land, and ecosystems and biodiversity to think about what other sectors are thinking about transformation. So I think today what I might do, and thank you for allowing me to give what for me is just a resource presentation to set the scene for the real discussion that is moving forward for people who are the real experts in this issue. And I think I would just maybe speak a little bit about what the IPCC 6th assessment report has said about transformational adaptation, which is the last time that this information was updated at this global level. And as Dada has pointed out, we are moving towards the 7th assessment. And I might just have a last slide at the end to show maybe what this community can contribute to the 7th assessment in terms of examples, in terms of good practices, in terms of cases. I think where I'm drawing a lot of these examples from, and you will find transformational adaptation being talked about throughout the assessment, which really concluded in 2023. But most of this is from the synthesis report, which is where the assessment is brought together in all these 3 dimensions to look at some of the key messages on where we need to act. But a lot of the what I present today will also come from the Working Group 2 report, which focuses on impacts, vulnerabilities, and adaptation, where I think in chapters 16 and 17 particularly. But of course, I think for this community, that one of the most relevant reports is the Climate Change and Land report, which I think might be a really good resource also for good examples and practices. I think, a lot of us are very familiar with transformational adaptation, and it's also seen in contrast to something called incremental adaptation. So incremental adaptation is seen as those actions that, don't really change the system. They maintain the essence or the integrity of a system or process at a given scale. But what is transformational adaptation? There are many definitions of this, and I'll just maybe give the sort of overview from the IPCC. And we know that the UNFCCC and so many other actors have taken on board this and gone with it. And I'm really very happy to hear about some of these other iterations. The term really appeared or was defined in the 5th assessment report as a change in fundamental attributes in natural and human systems, something that we know about. But could also reflect, changes in goals and values and paradigms on how we see development and adaptation. There was definitely a strong link there, and which we will see come back in the definition to sustainable development. The 6th assessment report, and I heard some of these words echoed in Dada's introduction today, is to the contribution to this term is to talk about the 3 dimensions of transformational adaptation. How widely these are being implemented? Are these merely at a local scale, or are these multi-sectoral across society and across regions? Do these reflect major shifts within a system? Does it also talk about, the depth of implementation, whether it's governance or finance, social and cultural values within a particular system that is looking to change? how rapidly or fast they are occurring. Are they occurring slowly, or we'd say incrementally, or quickly? And also the degree to which they challenge limits to adaptation. And this might be a little bit too quick a presentation to show some of the findings of the way that the IPCC has summarized limits to adaptation. But basically, we're thinking through the two kinds of limits, right? The soft limits to adaptation and the hard limits to adaptation. And both are very relevant, I think, to agriculture, ecosystems, and related systems. When you're thinking about soft limits, you're talking about the limits to adaptation that we see imposed by the lack of finance, maybe governance structures, that technologies have not arrived at a certain level. But when we're talking about hard limits to adaptation, and this is one of the big signals of the sixth assessment, was are these sometimes often irreversible or very hard to reverse impacts on, especially on ecosystem, the physical limits that are reached by the planet that prevent adaptation actions from becoming successful, the adaptation actions that we know today that are needed. So a sort of more radical or bigger thinking or more ambitious adaptation actions might be needed to counter or to challenge what the IPCC calls the hard limits of adaptation. So we'll come back to that again. In terms of the illustration of these dimensions of transformational adaptation, this is a figure, I think, in chapter 16 that looks into detail. I won't read it out in terms of what it means to do transformational adaptation that is deep, that is wide, that is fast. You have maybe different scales of transformational potential of adaptation. You have what maybe we typically talk about, the very sort of high potential of very widespread adaptation that introduces entirely new practices and challenges mindsets and leads to major shifts in perceptions of values. Maybe this is what Dindo was talking about, the transformational thinking. But we can also then think about transformational adaptation in a sort of low or medium register, where maybe these adaptations are not as widespread, they're more localized, the mainstreaming is not completely there. So I mean, this is really the lower scale is going towards more incremental approaches to adaptation. So you can also see the transformational adaptation in three maybe main registers. But what is really interesting, I think, here is that if you look at the column with limits, you see that sort of low potential, low transformative potential adaptation may approach, but do not exceed or substantively challenge the soft limits. Maybe they don't challenge the financial barriers or technological barriers. But when you think about ambitiously towards high transformative potential adaptation, you think about the adaptation action that exceeds, goes beyond the soft limits that are given to us right now, and approaching or challenging hard limits. And I do see a lot of this ambition, especially on ecosystem restoration, right? And the ecosystems are some of the first sort of signals of impact and risk that then go down and cascade and into agricultural systems. But those are some of the hard limits that I think that a lot of people are still trying to challenge with respect to ecosystem management, restoration, etc. So I do see some of this potential happening here. I think the questions here are what is needed, right, to challenge these hard limits, but also like how successful are these actions? And in the seventh assessment, we're very interested in making sure that we that this is documented. So I think one of the well-known aspects of the well-known sort of findings of AR6 is that there's quite little evidence so far of transformative adaptation practices across sectors and regions. We hope that this has changed since 2021, when the last maybe they closed the literature, and maybe from then to now we're hoping to already have much more evidence that we can write about. But some of that was also found that a few of these documented responses were indeed very multidimensional. So that was a sign of transformation. They were wide, they were deep, and they were rapid. But it also shows there are so many challenges to achieving this change that meets all these criteria. is deeply challenging for regions like Asia, Australasia, Pacific, Africa, but also even for sort of regions with that have more developed plans. But it also involves a lot of trade-offs, which I think are also preventing a lot of transformation from taking place, or transformative actions from taking place. So this, is a representation of how challenging it is and how difficult it is, but it also is maybe a reflection of the gaps in the data. Is there perhaps evidence that we don't know about? Has this evidence been consolidated? Have we made a assessment or study of the effectiveness of these adaptation actions, in ecosystems or agriculture towards transformation? Are we seeing big, deep societal changes? I think a lot of this evidence is still very sparse, and I think we could really hopefully improve on this. I think just to trundle towards the end, again, the synergies of development has come up, and one of the big things that the AR6 has said is that there is high confidence and a lot of evidence that adaptation has a lot of synergies, more synergies and trade-offs with sustainable development. And I think we know that intuitively. We've probably seen this diagram in many ways, especially if you look also at the column with land and oceans, and also society, livelihoods, and economies, where we all are working on in terms of agriculture. However, this really leads us to the question of whether of how do we support stakeholders to enact longer term, sustained, deep and rapid transformational change, because this is a diagram about near-term actions and how effective they are, rather than continue with incremental steps. Maybe they're working now, but they might not work in the future, where our sort of higher emission scenarios pose greater and greater limits and constrain the adaptation actions that are effective now but may not be effective later. I think just to bring us all to the decision matrix that we have to think about, I think the sixth assessment has also a figure. I think this is the chapter on risks, but also there is a chapter on the decision support systems and decision making. How we might, this, for me, intuitively, this looks like a diagram which shows that how we might end up having to do transformational actions anyway. Because if you go through the decision matrix and you go, are our actions today, enough? And then sort of asking ourselves whether this residual risk, or the risk that remains after we take this action, are these tolerable? Are these acceptable? Yes and no. We might have to end up with these transformative actions anyway. And whether this transformational actions, sort of seeing them, way before we have to end up doing them, where we might have to do them too quickly, or in a way that is not just or not equitable, and then becomes inconsistent with the goals that we want to meet. So I think this really is sending us the big lesson on planning, the importance of institutions that do planning, but also the multi-sectoral approach. Very quickly, and I know that I'm a little out of time, there's a lot to say, I think, about agriculture and food systems. A lot of it is very contextual. What sort of nexus are you're trying to address right now? Is it food? Is it water? Food and water and ecosystems and agriculture. But I know some of the studies that have maybe come since, and it's probably not new to many of you, is that we certain principles are seen by a lot of people as important, including addressing structural contributors to vulnerability and exposure to climate risk, and also how different this exposure is for different groups of people. Consider social context, equity, and power relations. So without doing this, and without having inclusive participatory processes, will not lead to successful adaptation. And I think this is also clear from AR6 that inclusiveness and participatory processes are not really just a checkbox anymore. It really helps you to go towards successful adaptation. If you don't want them to fail, you need to consider these. You need to consider that diverse stakeholders that are part of this decision matrix. I think there's also, calls for agricultural sectors to think very clearly about where crops are being produced, where livestock is being produced, and think about geographical locations and shifting locations for these. And very, importantly, aligning these shifts, right, in production, where production is located, with changing landscapes and ecosystems and expected changes in landscapes and ecosystems in the future. Maladaptation, I really wanted a slide on maladaptation, but transformational adaptation is actually one of the outcome criteria for how you consider maladaptation. Maladaptation, you can also measure it through its benefits to humans and ecosystems, but you can also measure through whether it's leading to structural change or stopping long-term change that is needed. I think I just want to sort of end in this respect. As somebody who has worked in the agricultural sector or with FAO in the past, I do see, for example, particular importance of agricultural research organizations. We have so many of these nationally and regionally, aligning these to maybe doing the kind of research that we need to implement or to find transformative options. I think critically important, as also our governments and funding entities and that resource our needs. So please follow the work of the IPCC. It's really all of you that contribute to this, whether through authors who might be in the audience, but also the people who will down the line help us to review the drafts and make sure that priorities of this sector and the nexuses that are inherent are included and adequately in the 7th assessment. So thank you very much on behalf of my co-chairs, and we'll put links to mailing this, and looking forward to the discussion. Thanks very much. Dada, over to you.
Thank you very much, Teresa, and thank you for always being available to us and giving us the scientific perspective. Thank you so much for providing the scientific framework of what really constitutes transformational adaptation, and how they relate to agri-food and nature conservation. And I hope we are close to 100 participants in the room, and I hope they found your presentation quite helpful, as I found it, for me, very, very informative. I'm gonna carry the major principles of transformational adaptation in my head now. So before we dive into the first panel discussion, which will reflect on what Teresa has shared, what I have shared regarding what Dindo has shared, what I have shared regarding the results of our NDC workshop last March, we know that the audience is close to 100 there, and we would like to hear from you. So before we dive into the first panel discussion with our distinguished panelists, we will be discussing whether biodiversity and nature conservation really goes hand in hand. Is it really possible? So what better way to do this than to ask our audience, close to 100 of you, to do a Mentimeter poll? I hope you don't mind. So I'll hand it over to Marilee to facilitate this poll.
Thank you very much, Dada. Hello, everyone. I will just be sharing my screen and hope that you will all be able to join the poll. Dada, can you confirm that everyone can see the screen?
It's in there. I see it.
Perfect. So to access the Mentimeter, please either follow the instructions on the screen. You can also directly scan the QR code, or alternatively, I have just shared in the chat a link that you may use as well. So I'll just give everyone a couple of minutes to join the Mentimeter before moving to the first question.
We hope you can really join us. I know how it is to sit on a webinar and you are just listening and listening. So hopefully you could let us know your points of view by really getting into this QR code and answering our poll. In this way, you are also part of the speakers for this webinar.
Right, I see a lot of thumbs up, so I think joining is working. So I will move to the first question.
So okay, Marilee, go ahead. No, go ahead. Yeah.
So the first question is, in your opinion, which of these systems or group is most at risk from ongoing and future climate change? And you can rank the answers according to what you think. So I hope everyone has joined and is now able to respond to the question. If not, maybe I'll go back to the instructions.
I see thumbs up coming up. All right. Marilik, should we try again for the first question?
Here we go. All right, great.
So you are answering the question, which of these systems or groups is most at risk from ongoing and future climate change? And we are seeing that the first answer is coming up strongly as food security and agri-food system, ecosystems and biodiversity. It's really reflecting the theme of the workshop. We hope our panelists are also looking at the results of this Mentimeter poll, so that perhaps we could ask you to reflect on the answers as well later on during your intervention. Okay, we've got 46 responses. Should we move, Marilik, to the next one?
Yes, I will just save these results so that we have them. Yes. Right. Now moving to the second question. So based on the question that you have just responded to, the next one focuses on which actions we should be prioritized. So which actions should be prioritized to address climate change risks to achieve zero hunger while conserving nature and biodiversity? So just like the previous question, this is a ranking question. So you can now rank these different groups of actions and solutions in the order that you think they should be shown.
Yeah. So the first question really tries to look at priorities or challenges that's being faced. And here we are looking at how do we address those challenges. I suppose it's ecosystem conservation. We're seeing that ecosystem conservation, water management, and livelihood are coming out as strong solutions. We've got 42 answers out of 62 registered, and still coming up more. So ecosystem conservation is really coming out strong. Water management, livelihood diversification, climate-tolerant cultivars and breeds, forest restoration, climate-proof infrastructure, productive equipment and infrastructure, and bioenergy. All right.
Okay. Then we have one last question for you. And this question here, I'll go to the next one. This question is an open question, so you can fill in the words that you think are most relevant. So how can stakeholders that are working on zero hunger and biodiversity better collaborate to address climate change risks and scale transformational adaptation? So in your responses, you can put in different examples, and then it will show up in a word cloud on the screen as soon as we receive answers.
I'm excited to see your words written here, dear participants. Strengthening or enabling environment. Thank you for that. Ensuring ecological diversity, community engagement, really strong water theme as well, no? Breaking the silos, food waste management, food diversification, protecting the forest, community engagement seems to be coming strong. What do you think, Marilik?
Very interesting. And I see also a lot on, there's some systems thinking, synergies. So I think very
And we
much
also,
what we're discussing today.
yeah, there's also a mention of global policy. We do need that to be aligned with our local action. Community driven. It's good. There's a mention also of indigenous people's rights. And biodiversity food nexus. Agricultural stockpiling. I would love to know more about that. Anything. So really coming out strong community engagement, financing, systems thinking, food waste management. Anything else, Marilik?
Common measures for change. I mean, it shifted against our list, but I like that one as well.
Yeah. Community engagement, community empowerment. I think it's very important indeed, common measures of change. No? So we are reaching further understanding. There's an answer on stop corruption. I think that really helps a lot if we do stop that. It's a very practical measure. Transdisciplinary actions. Okay. I think we don't have any more answers coming in. And that it was the last question we had, right?
That was the last question we had, indeed. So with that, I'll hand back over to you and stop sharing the screen. Thank you, everyone, for joining our poll questions.
Thank you so much. And it was really good to hear from all of you on your viewpoints on transformational adaptation and the nexus of food and biodiversity conservation. And I think the poll answered our question, actually, that biodiversity conservation and nature conservation with food production can actually go hand in hand with some of the suggestions that they have sent us in the poll. So to better discuss this, let's move on into our first panel discussion, in which we're really looking into the question of whether food production, nature, and biodiversity conservation go hand in hand. How can governance, finance, policy, and science help align these systems for transformational adaptation? So our first speaker for this panel is Ms. Esther Penuña, Secretary General of the Asia Farmers Association for Sustainable Rural Development. We see Esther everywhere really waving the farmers' flag for the Asia Pacific region. So Esther, you've seen the poll. You've seen the answers. Can you further reflect on how the farmers deal with the challenges of producing our food while protecting biodiversity on a daily basis? What is the role of farmers in what we are discussing now on transformational adaptation? Esther, very nice to see you. The floor is yours.
Very nice to see you also, Dada, as well as other friends and colleagues, some of whom I know, like Dindo from IUCN. Okay, and thanks for the invitation. Really pleased to be here. And I'm really pleased to see the results of the Mentimeter, where food security came up as a very big priority challenge. And really, thank you so much for this, because we really know, and because we know that food is produced by the agriculture, fishery, forestry, pastoralist sector. And these industries depend so much on climate and the weather. And when you come to think of who is the biggest, one of the, if not the biggest sector in the agriculture, it will be the farmers. Because the farmers, the statistics show under the UN Decade of Family Farming that it's family farmers who produce 80% of the world's food. And among this population of family farmers, small-scale family farmers who own less than 2 hectares of land, or who manage at least less than 2 hectares of land on the average, they produce as much as 35% of the world's food, but they are 70%, the small-scale farmers are 70% of the farming population. And when we say agriculture is the most dependent sector for on weather, it's the family farmers who are really mostly affected by all the climate disasters, by all the unpredictable weather conditions, because our lives, our livelihoods, our incomes, even our assets will be seriously affected by this climate change. Now think about, so maybe that is why when governments look into the loss and damage of a climate disaster, it's always in relation to agriculture, how much crops has been damaged. Okay, so while we say that we are the most vulnerable, family farmers, millions, 540 million farms all over the world are most vulnerable to climate change, we don't just sit there and wait, no? Because we try to adapt, we try to innovate, we try to understand what is happening to us. And because of this research, innovation, and thinking, we have come to know, and maybe we have turned back to our previous practice, that agroecology, agroforestry, silvopasture, community engagement, defending our rights as farmers and indigenous peoples and as fishers, this is the way to be resilient. Just two examples. In the Philippines, we have an agrarian reform program where the government gives land to the landless. And in one farming couple who is like my idol, they were agrarian reform beneficiaries. They transformed their land from single rice farming to integrated diversified organic farming, where in their 1 hectare of land, they have rice, they have fruit trees like coconut and jackfruit, no, and avocado. They have fish on ponds, which they also use as water harvesting. They have fish, they have ducks, they have chicken, they have goats, they have flowers. So you can see a really biodiversity there, no? And plus, they establish amongst themselves, agrarian reform beneficiaries, a cooperative. And this cooperative markets their organic rice, and this organic rice has premium price, and so they are able to receive much more income from their biodiverse farm. They have eggs from the ducks, they have the meat of the ducks and the chicken, they have goat meat, for example, they have the fruit trees, they have the rice. So there's a diversity of income. When climate shock happens, at least maybe they will have chances to have incomes from the other crops that they produce. So this is biodiversity for us. Biodiversity in terms of the crops, the species, animals, flowers, and trees, so that we could have diversified incomes, and we could have mitigation measures, reduce risk for climate. Okay, so this is being done, this integrated, diversified, organic systems in farming, fishing, forestry, and pastoralism is being done through sustainable forest management, sustainable pasture management, sustainable fisheries management, everything about being sustainable. You may call it nature-based solutions, but for us, we understand this as sustainable management of our resources, as well as the big word today that we want to promote is agroecology, with empowering the farmers not only to produce, but also to process and to distribute through our farmers' organizations and cooperatives. So how do we, I really like also what was answered in the Mentimeter as the actions, because I took note of community empowerment, rights, indigenous people's rights, systems thinking. So maybe as a closing, I would like to draw from what Dindo and Dada said about transformational system, transformational thinking, and transformational action. Food security, food system is a system of production, processing, marketing, and distribution. If the transformational thinking is put farmers at the center of all this production. What are their needs? What do they need? What kind of support do they need so that they can produce more sustainably, so that they can process sustainably, so that they can market sustainably? Because family farmers are at the center of it. It is the nexus. By doing agroecology, by doing sustainable management of the ecosystem, we can unleash the potentials of millions of farmers for biodiversity and environment protection. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Esther, for such an impassioned intervention. I always really look up to you by really continuously waving the flag of the farmers groups, farmers organizations, and really reminding us that if we want transformational change, if we want transformational adaptation, we really have to put farmers at the very center of it. Because as you have said, farmers are already doing this, and what the farmers are practicing on the ground really reflects the principles of so many of the big words that we know: sustainable management, sustainable forest management, agroecology, and so it's really reminding us that if we want both nature-based solutions or biodiversity conservation and sustainable food production, the key to that is really putting farmers at the center and really also learning from what the farmers have already done. Thank you so much, Esther, and for really linking your intervention with the results. It's very much aligned from the Mentimeter results. And so from the farmer's point of view, we wanted to hear, Teresa has mentioned the importance of research organizations. And so I would like to call on Dr. Matthew McCartney from the research group leader of the leads the research group on sustainable water infrastructure and ecosystems at the International Water Management Institute. And we wanted to ask Dr. Matthew, how can science offer support to unlock co-benefits across agri-food and land and water systems and scale transformational adaptation? I see, Dr. Matthew, that you have 4 slides with you. We're really eager to hear what you have to say to us.
Right. Thank you very much, Imelda. And thanks everybody for joining. This is a very important question that you've asked, and I think that science can actually play a really powerful role in unlocking co-benefits across agri-food, land and water systems. Particularly, we're talking in the context of transformational adaptation, and it does this in 3 ways. The first is through understanding systems. So science can help us map and understand these intersectoral linkages, trade-offs and synergies, which Teresa mentioned earlier, across the different systems. So we all know that agriculture, land, water and biodiversity are deeply interconnected, and science helps us map those linkages and also to understand then where there are trade-offs and where there are synergies. So just as an example, IMI's work on water accounting, monitoring, digital monitoring, and modeling shows how water is used in river catchments. It shows what the trade-offs and synergies are.
Matthew, are you trying to move your slide?
Yeah, you can't see the change?
No.
Hang on.
We're stuck on the first slide.
Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Sorry, okay. Yeah, so what I was saying is it's understanding systems, these interconnections, and the trade-offs and synergies, and through modeling and monitoring and water accounting, for example, we see how water is used within catchments, we see which sectors are using the water, and we see where there's possibilities for increasing productivity, where we can maybe reduce pressure on ecosystems, where we can strengthen ecosystem services, and where we can enhance biodiversity outcomes. So this kind of integrated evidence is obviously essential if we want to think about how to make transformational change across sectors. The second way is through providing evidence for solutions and innovations. So as we mentioned just now, agroecology, regenerative agriculture, nature-based solutions, ecosystem restoration. All these approaches will deliver multiple benefits, food security, improved soil health, water regulation, carbon sequestration, etc. And what science does is help show which types of innovation could bring about those multiple benefits. So at IMI, again, we've piloted nature-based solutions like wetlands for flood protection and livelihoods. We've worked on exclosures in Ethiopia where you let land regenerate itself. We've worked on sand dams in Southern Africa, which are dams where you allow sand to build up and then water to be stored within the sand. We've worked on resilient nature-based water solutions in the MENA region. So these are all approaches which enhance transformational adaptation. And the science behind these solutions, whether we get it through modeling or remote sensing, or as is very important through participatory action research, this is what makes these interventions and these innovations both credible, so you demonstrate that they can really be effective, but also what we need then to scale them up and bring them to scale. And then finally, the third way is through influencing policy and finance. So science, simply put, it helps make the invisible visible by providing metrics and valuation methods that capture benefits that are often overlooked in decision making. So, for example, when we're thinking about soil health or biodiversity or groundwater recharge or avoided disaster losses, by bringing these to the fore, we can help influence the way that policymakers and financiers see the problems. And just as an example of this, the Global Commission on the Economics of Water recently produced their report, which made a very strong point about water and ecosystems being consistently undervalued, and that undervaluation driving overuse and degradation. And again, at IMI, we've been able to show the economic value of wetlands. We've done cost-benefit analysis of nature-based solutions, and then we provide the evidence from this research to governments, to proponents of this type of investment, to banks and to investors as a way to improve decision making, and again, hopefully to bring about transformational change. And finally, I should just add that when we combine scientific tools with local and indigenous knowledge, the solutions then become both technically robust and, as already been mentioned, socially legitimate, which is, of course, the key for enabling them to scale. So in summary, science helps us both understand, innovate, and influence. And if we embed that science into governance, finance, community practice, then we can truly unlock the co-benefits and move forward towards transformational adaptation across food, land, water, and biodiversity systems. So science is really at the core. Thank you very much indeed.
Hold on. Oops. Thank you very much, Dr. Matthew, for giving us examples really of how to unlock the co-benefits from the scientific point of view. We know that our audience may have a lot of questions, so we are inviting them to give your questions to the Q&A session part of the Zoom call, and we invite the panelists to give your answers in this session. We are now down to our we understand when we looked at the NDC 3.0 submissions that countries are actually really looking for significant a strategic shift is quite imperative, and we're looking at and this could mean one of the tools for bringing together this strategic shift or this transformational change is looking at the opportunities coming from innovative climate finance mechanisms to de-risk agriculture investments. And for this topic, we are inviting Ms. Shannon Chua, who's an implementation and program development specialist at the Southeast Asia Disaster Risk Insurance Facility, or CDRIF, which is a partner now of FAO. Could you tell us how the Southeast Asia Disaster Risk Insurance Facility works, and how, from your experience, finance can serve as an enabler for transformational adaptation at scale?
Good morning, and thank you, Imelda. I think a lot of participants today might not really be aware of who CDRIF is, so let me just begin by explaining who CDRIF is and actually why we were created in the first place. So CDRIF, or the Southeast Asia Disaster Risk Insurance Facility, was an initiative by the ASEAN +3 member countries through their finance ministers. And the goal was really to create this institution risk transfer facility to help our ASEAN member nations essentially take crisis out of disasters. It's providing not only risk transfer solutions for member countries, but also building on their technical capacity, institutional capacity, investing in data and other public goods, so that it's a more holistic approach to building resilience for many of our ASEAN member countries who are also, unfortunately, among the most vulnerable to climate change and disasters. The way CDRIF is set up is kind of like we would often say, think of it like your multinational development bank. So we are owned and governed by our member countries. So for us, we have 8 member countries: Thailand, Philippines, Cambodia, Laos, and many others who are joining us. And they essentially provide guidance for us. So that's also on the policy side. We make sure that we are aligned not only on the regional, but also on their local and national policy, so that we're really working hand on hand to develop and design solutions to build the resilience when it comes to whether it's in agriculture or other types of catastrophe and disaster risk. So that's who CDRIF is. We have the CDRIF Insurance Company that does provide all of these technical solutions to our members, and we're incorporated in Singapore, and that's really where now the instrument part takes place. We can provide and we can write all of these insurance contracts to help de-risk now countries when it comes to looking at their climate and disaster risk. That's really the main background of CDRIF. And it's this, we call it co-developing solutions with our members. So it's not as if CDRIF comes into the picture and tells you, this is our product, which is often the case for private sector, right? So it's a different approach here. Because we are development in nature, we work with the member countries. For example, we've worked with Laos for a very long time to design and develop a risk transfer and insurance solution that makes sense to them and addresses their needs. We are able to launch the first in the world of a reported loss trigger. So it looks now at the losses reported by their own disaster management committee on the number of people affected, and that's used as a trigger for the insurance product. So it's really this co-developing solutions with all of our government, all of our stakeholders to find something that makes sense to them and bridge now this link between your international markets that actually takes on this risk and bridging that on to the countries who actually demand this type of instrument to be put in place. When we look at now agriculture, which is the main topic of this program, I'd like to share more about the work that we're doing with FAO. CDRIF, FAO, and 6 ASEAN member nations, so that's Laos, Philippines, Thailand, Cambodia, Malaysia, and Vietnam, through a GCF project, have decided to embark on, I would say, this journey of finding what's a potential solution that helps to address the current challenges and all of these risk gaps in ASEAN in agriculture, and finding now solutions that works not only within their systems, but also boost their resilience overall. So together with the FAO, we are actually looking at a solution where it's not just providing a risk finance solution. So we feel finance is just one part of the puzzle, but it shouldn't be the end all be all of it. So we're looking now at linking together a risk transfer mechanism together with other adaptation related, risk mitigation, risk resilience related activities, so that you're also empowering now your members and you're capacitating your members to better address all of these climate and disaster risks they're facing. We also see this as something that aligns with the overall thinking of how risk management is. I'm not sure if you've seen this chart, right? That there are multiple ways to address risk. You first try to avoid it, you try to reduce it, you try to transfer it out, and you try to manage. And that's really where we see this whole program. So we have all of these climate mitigation, adaptation in place. You have risk transfer mechanisms, and there are things that you have to retain yourself, and those can be addressed through looking now at, as Dr. Matthew mentioned earlier, seeing all of these science and the research coming out on how can we better understand the risks that we actually have in agriculture and these different ecosystems. How can we then use that to influence other policy shifts, paradigm shifts, as also underscored by Sir Dindo earlier in his opening remarks, so that it's this whole transformational, whole of society, whole of ecosystem, social ecological systems approach to building that resilience and actually addressing all of these risks. So it has to be all hand in hand.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Shannon, for really sharing with us how de-risking climate change and agriculture investments can go hand in hand, while at the same time also preserving nature. So, and that really rounds up, like from the farmer's perspective, from the science perspective, and from the finance perspective. I really wish that one of our speakers have joined us to really give us as well the policy alignment, the policy perspective. But I wanted to also mention some of the comments on the group chat here, coming from our participants. Sucharit Neo has mentioned UNEP IUCN. I'll put FAO there. IPCC should support, coordinate more intensive group work, participatory research, fostering community actions. APAN may leverage this platform in this regard. Another comment from Oshin Sharma: agroecology is increasingly being recognized as a pathway for agri-food system transformation. And yet countries face very different starting points. So I think that is quite the reality that we are facing now. And so thank you so much for this sharing. We hope that the audience are kindly check the Q&A section of the Zoom, and perhaps there are some questions there for our finance, science, and farmer perspectives. We are moving on to our panel discussion 2. Can I see our slide there? On panel session 2, discussion 2, is discussing enabling system shifts. How do we really enable this now? Do we have practical examples of nature-based solutions as co-benefits, strategies, and leverage points for transformational adaptation? We really wanted to hear practical examples of how we are doing this on the ground. So for panel 2 on ecosystem shifts, we are inviting Mr. Yesun Erdene, the Director General of the Crop Policy Implementation and Coordination Department of the Ministry of Food, Agriculture, and Light Industry of Mongolia. Mr. Erdene, are you online? And can you answer the question, could you provide some practical examples of nature-based solutions as co-benefit strategies for transformational adaptation? Mr. Erdene? May we hear from you?
Hello?
Yes. Oh, Sir Galen.
Yes. Can you hear
We
me?
we can hear you. Yes, we can hear
Yes,
you.
camera is okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Warm greetings to you all.
Have you opened your camera?
Let's open camera. I cannot.
It's okay. If the camera can be opened, then we would just love to
It's
hear.
okay, camera, it's okay?
No,
No?
we don't see you.
Oh, sorry. I cannot.
I'm sorry, I believe it's not possible to allow you to turn on your camera as you entered as an attendee, but we can hear you loud and well, so please feel free to start your intervention. We can hear you. Please speak.
Okay.
Yes, okay.
Can you hear me? Okay, sorry, his camera is some problem.
We don't
Usually-
need you to
Okay,
turn
can
on
you
the camera.
hear me?
Please
Okay,
kindly just
yes,
speak.
very sorry. Yes, my name is Yusung Yurden. I work at Ministry of Food, Agriculture and Light Industry. It is my pleasure to join this important webinar, the Nexus of Food, Agriculture, Land and Biodiversity. Mongolia's Ministry of Agriculture currently implementing agricultural campaign to foster sustainable development of arable farming sector, where we describe it the target number one as climate change adaptation and environmentally friendly agriculture production. In line with the country is nationally determined contribution and national adaptation plan. Within this target, there is climate measure for establishing forest structure around crop and vegetable production areas, which can be considered as sectoral good practical example for nature-based solution. I believe that the cooperation on forestry with private sector actors, subvention for pens posted by the this Mongolian Food Agriculture Light Ministry of Food Agriculture Light Industry and remaining investment by crop combines can scale up transformative adaptation such as forest strip establishment in Mongolia. It has multiple co-benefits such as establishment of sectoral policy priorities, food security, biodiversity, and natural resource conservation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Yeah.
Yusun
Very
Erdene.
sorry.
And apologies
Yeah,
for
it's
the technical
cameras, but-
issue,
Yeah.
but we are very happy to hear about the example of nature-based solutions and co-benefit strategy from Mongolia. Thank you very much. And you may see that there might be a question for you on the Q&A portion, if you could also take your time to answer that. And for our next speaker of another example, we are calling on Ms. Ajanta Day, the Joint Secretary and Program Director of Nature, Environment, and Wildlife Society in India. Ms. Ajanta, the floor is yours in providing us another example of nature-based solutions for food production. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A very good morning to all of you, and I'm very grateful to UNEP, IUCN, and FAO to provide us this opportunity to share some of our experiences. Now, I will just try to share my really things work. Yeah. So can you see it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can see it.
So let me put it into this mode. Yeah. So I will be sharing one example from the Sundarbans, which you know that is spread over India and Bangladesh, the largest contiguous mangrove forest in the world. And Indian Sundarban comprises around 9630 square kilometer. Well, it has a lot of accolades. But just to help you understand the typical ecology of that area, we have 102 islands which mark this entire Sundarban, and all these islands are like turtle back. And the people to reside in 54 out of these islands, 48 are uninhabited. And in the 54 islands, we have the embankments, earthen embankments, just to protect the tidal water from saline inundation into this area. Now, the thing is that, next slide. So when we look at the system that works there, the ecosystems, this is typically that the mangrove ecosystem where we have along just in the foreshore of the embankment, the mangroves, and then the marine ecosystem. So when we look at it from the marine perspective, so we see that this particular area is a transient zone. It's an intertidal area. It's not that it is it is very dynamic, and tides are coming, going. And so this particular area is the transient zone between the land, as you see, the embankment and the agricultural houses and all that is there on the left side. And then you have this very beautiful mangrove ecosystem, and then the marine system. So when this marine system, we look at the ecosystem perspective, then you find that this marine system through this transient zone actually gets into the terrestrial ecosystem. And what we have learned actually as an organization, as a conservation practitioner working in this sector for quite many years, that that in the Sundarban, we have to face the storms and the cyclones, daily tidal inundations. So it's not that we wait now for the storms and cyclones to hit. Even the high tide times, the area is becoming very, very vulnerable because the tidal waves have the amplitudes, and all these are increasing and impacting. Way back in 2009, we experienced Tyla, and that had completely changed our understanding, because we were previously doing, problems of tiger straying, working on sea turtle, and all that related to biodiversity alone, conservation and protection of the forests and biodiversity. But when in 2009 we saw that my goodness, the embankments completely breached and there was saline inundation everywhere. So agricultural people left away. 3 years, there was nothing, no production. And then we started to develop this community-led mangrove restoration project. So this mangrove restoration that we started in 2009, now it spread over to till in 4 years to 4,500 hectares, and we use the carbon finance. And it is very important to know that when we talk about transformational adaptation, it cannot be in a project mode. It has to be a program mode. So that's a key learning that we had taken, that when we go on tick boxing and outputs, deliverables, well, when we talk about transformations, it doesn't go with the project thematic, project headset. It has to, or mindsets, it has to be a program mindset which works on the various components to build this coastal resilience. And that's what you see. The next, what happened was, you see I will show you just one example in the paucity of time. You see in this 1995, in that particular area, you can see that there was small island here and nothing else here. Nothing was there. And this entire area, I remember in 2010, I was standing there and this river Hooghly was roaring on the 4 times people have changed their houses because it's eroding. And then in 2010, these small patches of mangroves were coming and we started this community-led mangrove restoration. And this area, over the years, you see when you start, mangroves are like amazing ecosystems. They keep on accreting. They give you so much of benefits, we all know. But what it did, the transformation you see gradually, this entire area now, when you see in 2024, it is acting as the bioshield. So more than carbon sequestration, more than anything, the bioshield aspect of it is very, very strong. And the crab collectors, the shrimp collectors, when we started in 2010 here, there were only 50 crab collectors. And now here, there are more than 600 crab collectors. So all these transformations that it is built, it is making to create this bioshield is very, very important. And I would like to share one more picture. You see, what happens is particular this area, you see it's the front, in the front, if this mangroves are creating the bioshield, and you see on the right-hand side, the agricultural fields, the assets are so protected. And spontaneously, I'll tell you that news was never into agriculture, integrated systems, biodiversity farming. But in 2014, when these sort of transformations happened in front of the embankments then the farmers and the fishing communities told us, now that our lands are protected, we will go for sustainable farming model. And then we developed from 2014 our verticals of agriculture, fishery, marketing, and you will be the infrastructures, because there were canals to store rainwater, but they were all getting saline inundated. So now we have Water Users Association, more than 10,000 farmers working for optimal use of that water. And also we have directly engaged with us biodiverse farming, about 1,000 farmers, and they have brought I can very well echo what from the South Asian Farmers Association, what she was telling, that to get that incentives of better pricing. So now Badabon Harvest brand has been created in 2018. This was all very organic way. It was not that we decided and we did, but when the farmers and our stewards, the mangrove stewards, community stewards, they wanted to go for the sustainable agriculture, well, they started producing it with the heirloom seeds and organic, natural ways of farming. And then they created this producer company, farmers producer company, Badabon Harvest. Badabon in Bengali, it's a Bengali area, local language means mangrove, and now it is marketed to nationwide. So they have their premium products like honey, rice, and very interestingly, coming back to the natives, it's one brand of rices, paddy is revived, which is called Horina Khuri. Horina is, the deer. So in the paws of the deer, maybe in the pug marks of the deer, some rice used to be grown, and we are very happy that the farmers had kept those seeds, but they were not practicing it. And now that it has been revived, those native seeds, and they are on the market. So I'm very, very thankful that I've been given this opportunity, and I would like to just say that transformational adaptation will definitely we'll have to presuppose a transformational thinking. But what I have understood in the societal or evolution, that whenever we had revolution, it didn't that way sustain for a long time. So rapid transformation is something I would consider with a quote, that what is that extent of the rapidity? So we have to go for transformations which can be many, many ways, very innovative, very, very dynamic, evolutionary, and we all have to work towards it. I'm happy to be here with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Janta, for really giving us a concrete example of how transformation happens on the ground. And I really take from your presentation what you have shared, that transformation, long-term transformation, cannot really occur merely as part of a project, a short-term project, but it has to be programmed in. In long-term planning. So this coastal example is really wonderful. So thank you so much for that. And so moving along, thank you. That closes our panel 2 of giving concrete examples. And we heard from Mongolia and India of examples from the ground. I see also that there is a raised hand, but in the interest of time, I may not be able to call Mr. Joman. I would invite you instead to post your question on the Q&A. And I also would like to mention that there is questions from Sucharit. There is another question about people and local communities. Matthew, can you answer the one on interdisciplinary regulatory frameworks, transdisciplinary co-design approaches? I am also very grateful that the IPCC reports a question on adaptation pathway. Teresa has answered that. The ecosystem biodiversity approaches on climate change adaptation. Esther replied to that question. There's a question as well on climate challenges and getting more vulnerability from glacier melting, erratic rainfall, and soil erosion. Thank you, Matthew from EMI, for replying to that. Pesticide question in the Asia Pacific region is on the rise, and Esther has also replied to that. There is also a question for Seadrift on GCF project and via FAO. And thank you, Shannon from Seadrift, for answering that. And there are also touch points between Seadrift in the Philippines. And thank you, Shannon, for answering that. So I encourage many of you to keep sending us in the next minutes more of your questions, and our panelists are already preparing answers to some of your questions. And so in the last 5 minutes or so of our question, we are really moving on towards, we learned so much from our distinguished panelists and from our speakers, keynote speaker Teresa, and welcoming remarks from Dindo. And we would like to invite Bo Daman of the Natural Resource Officer of FAO Regional Asia Pacific to give us a closing and a summary and his own personal insight on the sharing of our distinguished panel, and also the many questions that came from our participants who are very much engaged with the discussion. Bo, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Dada, and it was great to see so much active participation from everyone in the group, even up to the end of the webinar. Just to reflect on the discussion today, you mentioned Teresa's opening, and indeed a week and a half ago when we had the inaugural APAN webinar, I talked a little bit about some of the issues that Teresa raised, and And basically looking at the different elements of transformational adaptation, particularly in this region, you can see that the progress, as Teresa pointed out, is low. When we're talking about adaptation that addresses these different elements, depth, scope, speed, and sustainability, relevance, and adaptation that challenges limits imposed by some of the societal institutional characteristics of the food system. And during that webinar, highlighted that part of the reason for that is to do with the nature of agriculture when we're talking specifically about the food system. And today, what we wanted to do was, to expand some of the thinking that was started with that inaugural webinar, and we've been very fortunate to have really great perspectives from our different panel members about some of the shared challenges that we face across the food system and biodiversity in our ecosystems in developing transformational approaches towards adaptation. Particularly, we heard from Esther about the role that smallholders play in maintaining the food system across the region, and how the role of diversity in terms of on-farm diversity, biodiversity, but also livelihood diversity plays in sustaining smallholder agriculture, and the importance of approaches like agroecology in maintaining that diversity in our food systems. We also heard from our participants about the importance of ecosystem-based approaches, and of course from our colleague Hussein Adene at the Ministry of Agriculture in Mongolia about work that the ministry is doing, for example, to promote ecosystem-based or nature-based solutions, integrating, for example, tree crops and more diverse production systems into their work to better forge this link between agricultural, food, and biodiversity systems. We also heard today a lot about enablers, the role that science, for example, plays in better understanding problems associated with linking different systems. And Matthew from IMI also identified solutions, or how science can play a role in identifying solutions that cut across systems and deliver multiple benefits. So truly transformational in their approach and thinking. Finance as well. Shannon from CDRIF talked a lot about a regional country-led initiative to encourage improved risk financing in Southeast Asia and new initiatives to try and bring that type of thinking into agriculture. And this last presentation from Ajanta about the work in the Sundarbans in India and Bangladesh through mangrove restoration, bringing in other types of finance like carbon finance, leading to a transformative change there. And more sustainable agriculture through the protection that restoration work affords. At the outset, we also heard a lot about the role that policy can play in driving transformational adaptation. We heard about the Kunming-Montreal targets, the fact that many of those targets already are looking at transformational adaptation. We also heard about the UNFCCC, the Paris Agreement, and the programs of activity that countries have outlined to address climate change risk to food systems. Data also mentioned, of course, a workshop that a number of organizations and countries across the region organized earlier this year to talk about these issues and the action that they're implementing on the ground. And indeed, looking ahead to the APAN event next month, I know that more talk about the global goal on adaptation and also the development of shared indicators to track progress against adaptation targets globally will be an important way to ensure that all of the policy work that's being done across countries is driving towards a common improved system resilience across multiple systems, whether they be food, biodiversity, infrastructure, health, livelihoods, or whatever we want to improve in our societies. So I'll leave it there. It is through events like this that we hope to bridge across some of the barriers that keep us locked into thinking about one system or one solution. And Dindo, in his opening, he mentioned that he was curious about whether we end up talking about transformational thinking. It's a lot to ask of a group in an hour and a half. But I do think that some of the examples shared, the eagerness of the audience to engage with this event shows that there's no shortage of will to engage and to reach across and engage with stakeholders across a range of different sectors and systems to think about what transformational adaptation means and what the benefits could be. And you know, as Dindo mentioned as well, these systems are in effect two sides of the same coin. They are one interconnected system or sector, and the more opportunities that we have to think about our work in that way, the more effective our work on the ground can be. So just to highlight that this isn't the last webinar in the lead up to the APAN event, there will be another event next Monday on the 25th of September on cities, infrastructure, and industry. And then the week following, there will be another webinar event on health, livelihoods, and societies. And of course, I hope everybody online can join us as well in Bangkok for the APAN proper from the 29th of September to the 3rd of October at the UN Conference Center in Bangkok. So thank you again to our presenters. Thank you to our moderator, Dada. And thanks also to everyone behind the scenes who's made this webinar possible. We wish you the best for your Monday and the rest of your week. Thank you.
And Bo, we are asking everyone, the panelists, to kindly turn on their cameras just for a photo.
Oh, of course.
Photo, very important. We are in the
Very
Asian
important.
region.
Absolutely.
Our panelists and speakers. Jinmin, is it possible you take the picture, you count 1, 2, 3, and then take the picture? For everyone who can turn on their video, just turn on your video. Thank you, your camera. Jinmin, are you taking the pictures?
Yes. 1,
Okay.
2, 3, please. Yes, perfect. Thank
And one
you.
more. It's
One more,
finished? You
okay.
took everyone? You took
Yes,
everyone's
okay.
picture?
One
Okay.
more. 1, 2, 3. Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It was such an engaging and exciting webinar. Thank you again. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Did we save the questions? Mary Leek? Can I ask just the Secretariat, is it possible to record or keep a copy of all the questions asked?
Sure. Thank you so much, Dada. We will send it to you.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you so much indeed. Bye.
Bye.